Hello and welcome to the Metal Pack Pod, the industry's leading podcast for the global metal packaging market. The Metal Pack Pod is brought to you by the Metal Packager, the number one digital resource for the global metal packaging market. With over 8,000 monthly users in over 150 countries globally, be sure to check us out on metalpackager.com. I'm your host Alex Fordham, and in today's episode we welcome Steelforce Packaging CEO Davide Padovani. Recently, the Trump administration has created uncertainty and complications in the materials sector, particularly for steel and tinplate prices. It's too early to say what the consequences will be, as the administration has announced partial retreats and exclusions for certain countries, but it's that uncertainty that is causing some turbulence. During this episode, we unpack the potential consequences to the materials sector. As well as this, I talked to Davide about how the steel industry is thriving to become sustainable and environmentally friendly. He discusses the challenges of transitioning to electric arc furnaces and the importance of balancing environmental concerns with the realities of the industry. An episode not to be missed for sure. But before we begin, we must give special mention to our sponsors, PPG. Their range of innovative and sustainable solutions help protect and beautify the world. Now on to today's show. So good afternoon, Davide. How are you?
Hi, Alex. Good afternoon to you. All is good here. I'm glad to hear from you again. How have you been?
Very well, thanks. Yeah, I say good afternoon, but never quite sure with you where you are in the world because out of anyone I know in the industry, you're one of the people that clock up them one of the most air miles. So yeah, whereabouts are you this week?
I'm just landed in Europe, so it's afternoon just as it is for you today. But yesterday it was indeed, it would have been morning if it was yesterday.
So we're on the same time zone anyway,
More or less,
give or
yes. More or
take an
less,
hour or so.
yes.
So all good. But no, yeah, looking forward to an interesting conversation. I know where there's lots of certainly in the material sector, lots of interesting information that we can go through, not least with the recent Trump inauguration and lots of activity there, which we can get into in a short space of time. So yeah, looking forward to it. But just to begin, yeah, how's the start of 2025 been for Steelforce Packaging and yourself?
Oh, it has been very, very interesting. There's a lot of news, as you probably said. I'm sure we'll dive into all of that shortly. But when things are changing, the fronts are very active. People want to know, people want to understand. There is certainly a knowledge gap in the market. Demand has been there is a little bit more optimism, especially in the packaging business versus what it has been on average, in the last 2 or 3 years. 23 has been what it has been. 24 has left a little bit of the fear related to the year before. And 25, it seems like people are getting used to go back to what it used to be. So I would say that demand is there. The challenge is the uncertainties that can makers and canneries have had to deal with when planning their production, their orders, their demand in 2025. You don't really know where you're going to get raw materials from, where you're going to go in terms of final costing, and that creates a lot of trouble while making your result projections, and everybody knows that without result projections and accuracy in that space, tension is in the air. So I'd say it has been active and a little bit more complex than other years. I would say those are the favorite objectives for
Absolutely.
for the beginning of 25.
It sounds like a lot to unpack there, but I just want to use you said about there seems to be a lot more optimism within the packaging sector as a whole. I mean, what do you put that down to? It's a question I'm asking quite a lot of industry colleagues at the moment because, yeah, certainly post kind of COVID and the ongoing sustainability message, etc., we've seen a relative period of growth, not least for the metal packaging sector. But I think the downturn in the last 18 months took the industry by surprise a little bit. But it seems to be that certainly in the second half of 2024 and into 2025, there is the optimism which you've just intimated there. So what do you factor that reason behind there? Is that governmental policy level or kind of inflationary pressures relented a little bit, so there's more consumer spending, or do you just think it's a case of the natural cycles of business that we're seeing?
No, I would say that what we paid a lot for in 2023, and we had a tail of that effect also in 2024, was the fact that during COVID, uh, the cost of making goods became irremediably high, and there were a lot of supply chain disruptions that caused lack of trust, increased cost, and in our demand, in the way our products are marketed, and that has created a lack of visibility in the reading of the demand and big inventory decisions in order to provide with extra protections on supply chain, avoid stockouts. When all of that happens, you end up in the end with paying a high price for stability. And that high price means you have now an inventory that is very high and very costly, and your demand is uncertain. So that takes time and sacrifice to clean up, right? And that's what 2023 was about. In 2024, I would say that we have lived with the same heavy weight on our shoulders that we came out of 2022 with. And in the second half, I wouldn't really say there was a huge demand effect that restarted our optimism. I would say that we got rid of that weight and we could now face market in a more dynamic, in a more agile way with updated costing, and therefore with more optimism, with possibility of profiting, with possibility of maintaining prices, of stimulating demand with metal packaging solutions that are also competitive solutions again. And that, of course, creates a cycle of, trust, visibility, profitability, demand enhancing that is very good and very positive, I believe. So I would put it on an inventory negative effect of some complicated years we went through, and we finally got out of that tunnel.
Yeah, it sounds like there seems to be a bit of certainty that is taking place and a bit of optimism, which long may that continue. But I just want to move things on to talking about specific to you guys in the materials sector.
Please.
Steel prices, tinplate prices, etc. I mean, I suppose the elephant of the room we probably need to address from an early on is obviously the recent Trump administration inauguration, and it certainly seems that the US are going to continue with that protectionism and putting America first, which certainly for you guys must mean that there's going to be some turbulence at play. So, what first off your overriding kind of view on things as it stands? I mean, I don't want to ask you to look too far ahead because I think that's probably there's probably no need because we don't know from one day to the next what's going to happen. But overriding view so far, I mean, is this going to create further complications, not least in terms of tariffs, pricing for steel and tinplate, or is it too early to say?
Well, I would say that the macroeconomic aspect and possible consequences of these policy is President Trump usually addresses that as one of his favorite words in the vocabulary, tariff. I think there is a macroeconomic understanding of it, which sometimes the administration is trying to uh, give away, which is it's a tax on foreign countries in the end. From a macroeconomic point of view, again, it's true when you might attribute the tariff on goods that are coming from a certain region, but in the end, it's the importer that pays those prices, those tariff, and when the importer is paid that higher cost, which is a tariff, they're going to have to somehow reflect that in their pricing, and therefore the consumers will be paying for it. So, the immediate analysis that all macroeconomists are doing is how is the inflation going to be reacting to these policies, and this is something that because President Trump also had promised addressing the inflation issue that has been a problem during the Biden's days. So everybody's wondering how that would play out from a trading and importing point of view. Well, we know that he had announced certain movements, and he's actually following what he had already designed in a certain way in his campaign. The early movements are already very known because he started last week with Mexico, Canada, and China. And then at the beginning of this week, he has partially retreated the implementation with Mexico, giving them 1 month. He has allowed certain exclusions already to Canada, especially on the aluminum products. So it appears to be more of a of interpreting it, right? What that's the only thing we can do. It appears to be more of a thinking that goes in the direction of wanting to renegotiate trade terms with certain partners
Yeah.
to whom President Trump believes the trade hasn't been as fair as the US would have expected in terms of, I buy these from you, I import this from you, you also do this for me. So I think it goes more or less in that direction. There is a whole gray area still that is affecting the European policies. He has announced that Europe hasn't been good to the US neither. So I'm sure there will be more to the story to tell in the upcoming weeks. And there had been rumors also of all other import goods, especially regarding the metal and the steel industries, non-European and non-Chinese, non-Mexican, non-Canadian. But that appears to be in his agenda a little bit of a minor concern as of today because he has addressed this closer neighborhoods treatment in a way with higher priority. That is a fact. It does create some supply chain issues. It might. I think that there is a lot of our industry that is waiting a lot of goods from Europe. This is a fact. And yeah, I think it is the first time that European producers are in the US are actually, in a way, blackmailed that something's going to happen to their supply chain and I'm not sure how they're going to handle that. But again, this is a story that still has to start because there haven't been official announcement in that sense. With regards to Mexico and Canada, yeah, the flows regarding our industry were not so big. Mexico is not a producer of tinplate anymore. It hasn't been for a while, so that there is little to talk. There is a lot of other flat carbon products that are coming from Mexico into the US. That, of course, it is trade that will be affected. Starting next month, we will see what the agreements and discussions between the two governments will be during these 30 days of time that have been allowed before the implementation starts. And with regards to Canada, there's a big question mark indeed, because Canada is a net exporter to the US, and there could be the same issues that Europeans could be facing in the next weeks. It's something that the Canadian producer could also be facing in the upcoming days. So, and all of that capacity is exported to the US 100%. So there could be disruption right at the horizon in that sense. Yes.
Absolutely. It seems like it's a game of poker about who blinks first at the moment. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting times anyway, which yeah, we can look forward to commenting on. But I just want to yeah, just move things on. You in the pre-show notes that you guys kindly shared with us in terms of global capacity. It seems that the Chinese have drastically increased the capacity for tinplate recently, and it's yeah. Looking at around 40% of the global capacity, so that's grown tremendously. So, can you just perhaps provide a bit of an overview there about kind of the state of play globally in terms of capacity and the changes that we expect to see in 2025 moving into 2026?
Certainly, certainly. So, well, the Chinese have been, I would say, almost consistently increasing capacity in the last decades, template wise. It is today the biggest producer in the world of template as a country, individually. As a continent, Asia is the biggest producer because of China, indeed. I think they will end 2025 at approximately 8 million tons. There have been some tier two mills, generally famous mills that have been in the in the global scenario of template exports already for decades, like Comat, that have come back to life. Others like Jintai expanding their capacity. It looks like there is a certain spin in private investments in the teen industry in China. And that comes from what we normally tend to refer to with tier two mills. In the end, mills that do not have blast furnaces themselves, they buy HRC, hot rolled coils in an open market, and then they transform that into tinplate. And they are Unlike many other rerollers in Europe, they are 100% focused on tinplate. So they have pure tinplate outcome. All auto coils they buy, they turn into tinplate. So they are tinplate specialists without being steel makers themselves. And that has created, of course, the ability of using the immense raw material excess that China also has, and apply it into the packaging industry, creating a very high level of potential competitiveness. As long as template makers are also steel makers, you might have a certain consistency between products, the way they're marketed, right? Something that not necessarily happen. In fact, in Europe, template is way more profitable than hot roll coils and cold roll coils, but it's something that it might happen, should happen. It's a sort of way of controlling um, profitability and pricing consistency between products. When you have producers that are not steel makers, then you really get into a situation where the costing structure of manufacturing template could be disrupted, and then generating very aggressive pricing that would be closer to the raw materials trend rather than the template trend itself, which is what usually happens with China with re-rolling mills, and the main reasons why Europe has investigated an anti-dumping on China, which has been, as you know, temporarily approved on the beginning of December, and also the reason why the US are increasing the tariff and the weight on Chinese goods. So it is interesting how it is evolving in a way, even though it is public knowledge, the steel industry in China is not doing well at all. Unlike Europe, the Chinese steel economy is based on construction, and it looks like their ability to move people from the countryside into the city and keep building residences and space is finished. That kind of push that has granted all the steel makers in China those growth rates in the last few decades is not there anymore. They have reached a point where they're starting creating more value on unit level rather than scale on quantity, on volume. That's why they want to move from producing commodities into producing products and goods. They want to
Yeah.
become more engineers as an economy, and that puts, of course, these big raw material capacities under immense stress, with processes of concentration of capacity that are already happening. It started a few years back when Baosteel and Wuhan merged. Now, a couple of weeks ago, Baosteel acquired Shagang.
We interrupt this episode for a brief segment from our sponsors, PPG.
Packaging coatings from PPG draw on our company's 140-year history of innovation. We never stop improving our solutions to meet the evolving needs of can makers and the marketplace. That spirit of innovation results in technology like the cradle-to-cradle platinum-rated PPG Innovel Pro. PPG Innovel Pro is the latest enhancement to the world's #1 non-BPA beverage can coating. It still doesn't use any bisphenol ingredients, but experienced can makers report that it now sprays like an epoxy. Follow PPG Packaging Coatings on LinkedIn or visit packagingcoatings.com to learn more about why PPG is the coatings partner for can making excellence.
You mentioned in terms of the packaging sector, disappointment in the performance of the Chinese market. That's similar to outgoing Stolly CEO Gus Reel, who in a podcast with us recently mentioned the fact that he was very disappointed in the performance of the packaging sector for China globally, and that kind of does resonate with what you say in terms of the movement more towards electronics and consumer goods. So, do you think is that just China looking for new markets, exciting markets? For example, the EV sector, they seem to be moving in that direction. Do you think that's maybe having an effect on the packaging sector when we look at China?
Absolutely so. Absolutely so. And in fact, you will see that they have they have on raw materials like tinplate and TFS, they have been limited by their main export partners. Europe, US hasn't really been a major partner, but even Brazil, in the very same Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Thailand, Turkey very recently is also into an investigation process, and it seems like it will play out in favor of the Turkish mills protecting versus China. Um, so there is several areas of the world that have been big partners on their raw materials that have now completely closed the doors to them in terms of commodities. And however, this hasn't happened on goods and on products. And even in our industry, you have a very similar case to electrical vehicles. We could make a very nice syllogism with easy open ends. 20 years ago in China, there was almost no technology to produce easy open end. Nowadays, China is the biggest producer of easy open ends in the world. And besides the domestic packaging market not behaving very well in China, neither, a big part of the general line consumption in China is driven by construction. So that when construction doesn't really perform, all the general line and chemical cans are also not performing. However, many would argue, and especially the big mills, integrated mills in China, would argue that they have had incredible last quarter performance due to easy open end exports. Why? Because in fact, they're not exporting raw materials anymore, but they are very, very happy to export components, finished components. Easy open ends that have an added value are, of course, on top of that list, where a situation that is exactly parallel to the export of raw materials 5 years ago with tax rebates, incentives for export, very competitive pricing, can enjoy a flourishing moment. And I would say that all easy open end users in the world today, they know exactly that if you want to start a cost analysis, you may not and you should not start without analyzing what the cost would be to do that operation in China. It would be very risky to do a cost analysis without that figure today. And that's an excellent case. And it's quite concerning. It's quite concerning because the regulation that offers protection for our industry, for our steel industry in Europe, in the US, I would put also Brazil in that kind of reasoning, as is hitting very hard on the industry and is not offering any protection when it comes to finished good competition. So, but this is a topic that has been also largely discussed and hopefully would create some further regulation to complete and consistently approve laws that make sense for for the whole supply chain, not until a certain point.
Absolutely. And yeah, we've obviously mentioned the US, China, a little bit on Europe as well. I mean, I was quite interested to see that India potentially looking to double its capacity up until 2028. And that coincides nicely with kind of the growth of the middle class in packaging terms in India. And it certainly seems a territory that it's to look out for in terms of growth there. So is that something that is that sentiment that you potentially share? And if there's any other interesting potential trends globally that we can see, it'd be great to share that with our audience.
Yeah, I think that is it's something that I usually share with my colleagues and with my business partners. I think that um, India is definitely a country that we will be looking at from a macroeconomic point of view, with growing interest in the next 3, 4 to 5, 6, maybe even 10 decades. I mean, all macroeconomists talk about that with certain level of assurance. So there must be a reason for that. And they already are the biggest population in the world. The process of making their food industry more industrial and of expanding the lifespan of their immense fresh production is something that the country is looking at with consistent interest and consistent actions. Of course, in order to extend the lifespan, our industry is metal packaging is certainly one of the areas to look at and to invest in. You have two tinplate mills in China. They're both investing with discussions, ongoing plans, and even approved plans of investment to expand capacity further by indeed 2028, 2030. We're talking about getting to an export potential that is way bigger, maybe 3 times bigger than their internal demand, being 500,000 tons, a little bit more than 500,000 tons, 650, 600,000 tons. So a very interesting figure on a global level. And I believe the advantage that India offers is that um, the trade channels, their culture, and the way they have historically approached the Western world is something that offers a little bit more of sustainability and maybe friendly impact towards our economies as a business partner, as a trading partner, than what China has been. It doesn't mean that trade agreements and trade regulations and the trade peace with China could not exist for the Western world. I think Mr. Trump is looking at that with certain interest for the future. Certainly a goal that I would say is listed among his. But with India, that will come in a more natural way. I would say that's for sure.
Excellent stuff. And then just final, I know final notes in terms of trends that we can look forward to, or perhaps not look forward to in the coming year to 18 months. Is there anything else globally that we should be mindful of?
Well, I think maybe one last point on India is that in the last 6 to 8 months, they've also become very, very sensitive to green transitions. They have started talking about changes in technology and plans for regulating emission and the related costs and taxes related to emissions in the country. They have become way more careful on their own import policies into the country on raw materials and on template as well. So they're watching that out, which again brings them into a place that resembles more our Western way of doing the trade rather than the pure Asian one. And I think in the 66 to 18 months ahead of us, I think what the trends will be is for sure this the one aspect to look at is the conclusion of the safeguard journey, which will happen at the end of June 2026. We're very close to it. Right now, there's a current revision that has been demanded by the Eurofair for what regards the European treatment of especially the third countries quota and countries that are not China. The Chinese problem has been, between commas, addressed with the anti-dumping investigation. Other regions haven't, theoretically. So there is a review. There is the end of the safeguard journey coming next year. So there is a whole discussion and proposition to be thought and implemented for the after safeguard time, right? How are we going to treat capacities that are not European and not Chinese while getting into our continent? This is certainly one of the topics that will generate a lot of discussions, I'm sure, in the upcoming months. And then there is also the start of the CBAM. We normally at Steelforce Packaging refer the CBAM as until 2030 as a light CBAM, even though the fining system and the pure communication system will be over this year. The fines and the taxations will be very light until 2030 approximately. So that's maybe not so urgent as a problem. But I think that in the choice of the trading partners, CBAM will start having a great impact because of the declarations that are related to it. So any partner would have to be selected also on their ability to respond and to complete information requests, to have a control of their supply chain such that that eventual CBAM fostering would not become a problem from a costing point of view. So I would say that is also a factor that starts to enter the game in the upcoming 16 months, 18 months. Sorry for that. And then we will have to look at the again regulation evolution, especially on finished goods. You have nowadays an uncontrollable flow of finished goods. I did the example of easy open ends, but there is also example of finished goods, canned goods, fruits that are already getting into the Western world without much care from the authorities. And we're very much as industry players and as suppliers, we're very much interested in understanding how far the regulations will go in completing this journey of protectionism that of course makes sense for our industry, but somehow has to be completed in a way. So, and that could of course help the demand to go back and to regain a little bit of health and optimism looking forward, I suppose.
And just my concluding thoughts as well in terms of sustainability. I know Trump and his administration may well rein back on some of the net zero commitments that the previous administration looked to introduce. So do you think that could potentially be a real game changer for the for your sector, the materials sector? Because certainly I know you've been as an industry for after 2030 looking to convert to hydrogen in the Western world, and could force some big investments from governments globally. So do you think we could be in a change of flux that could potentially be quite revealing for an industry, and particularly challenging when you're looking to plan?
Alex, I'm one of those people that have been the most cynic about a 2030 plan. The level of funding required to execute such a transition within that time is not in the disposal of any of the private mill owners in Europe and in the US. If I have to judge by the speed at which European governments grant funding to their entrepreneurs, I've never been so optimist about making that transition by that year. I do believe that the transition is something that will happen to our industry as it is a natural requirement to become updated in the way we approach the environment and we coexist with the environment. So there is no doubt about it. I think that what President Trump did is just a very nice excuse for mills to just procrastinate the necessary investment until the point where those investments become actually sustainable from a regulation and from a founding point of view. I don't think that we will look at a hydrogen complete transition in the upcoming 10 years, if you ask me very concretely. I think we're looking at a scenario of 15 to 20 years, and it is absolutely unclear when the government will have the space in the regulation for that to happen legitimately, and how much the cost of our industry will result to be after that transition is made. So the lack of readiness under all angles, founding, costing, the economy related to it, tells us that actually, as much as non-environmental Trump's decision could look like, it is in a certain way very much current and realistic, huh?
Absolutely, because it's
when
been very
it applies to our industry.
absolutely because it's been very fashionable in the last few years to claim a business is sustainable and what you're doing, etc. But call me a cynic. Often it's become an opportunity to market a particular business about how great we are, etc. So hopefully it's just a time for all of us to just take a pause and just go, actually, yes, we want to be sustainable, but you still need to look after the here and now. So I think it might just give an opportunity to pause and reflect. And doesn't mean that sustainability isn't important. I think it means that hopefully approaching things with a level head. But that's just my take on things. But
So.
it'd be
I
interesting.
agree 100%. And we have been, what I've seen is that I think more in Europe than in the US, living between among those two areas of the world, we have been very enthusiastic about the word hydrogen, converting into hydrogen, just change our blast furnaces, just turn them into green stuff. Like this was magically happen with a wand in a few years like this. And and the fact that we are in a certain way now analyzing things with a little bit more of rationality should lead us also to think that while we prepare for that transition, that I'm sure technologically will come, um, there might be also other technologies that are available out there. And usually you can see a lot of examples of comparison between electric arc and hydrogen furnaces in the future, how the transition can be prepared, what's already available. And it's maybe from a costing point of view, way more viable in the short term that hydrogen full conversion, you know? And then that makes a discussion, in my opinion, way more interesting because it suddenly becomes realistic, you know? And we have a lot of examples in our industry of products and fields and in the steel industry overall that have coexisted between the electric arc furnace and coexistent with electric arc furnaces and blast arc furnaces, successfully coexisting as technologies and with a certain degree of evolution from the traditional blast into the electric arc. Of course, with the constraints and with the difficulties of supply chain, we know that it's different technology and different involvements. But um, I think that there is a lot of thinking in our case to do before wanting to market ourselves in a green way with that excuse and with that goal in mind. Because in the end, you know, if you're selling something that you cannot really implement, people will find out.
That's true.
and and you might end up losing your credibility as an industry. We'd rather market ourselves for what we are. We have a lot of good features. We have recycling. We have a lot of improvements in emission control with the traditional technology. And I guess we have a lot of room for improvements also on that front without having to completely transition into a technology that we honestly cannot afford.
Mm. Yeah, it's focusing on what we can do as opposed to what we can't do, isn't it? Really, I think that's how the way we need to frame it. But no, it certainly sounds like I know we've delved into lots of complex topics that we could probably have a whole podcast on. So it's been a really interesting discussion. But
True.
just my final question to you is just in terms of 2025. I mean, what personally, what are your main ambitions for the year ahead, and for your customers? What's the number one issue or target that they should be looking at for the year ahead?
Well, I believe for 2025, we have one interesting, I think the ambitious goal that we have from a regional point of view, especially in Europe, is trying to make the life of our industry as stable as possible. Despite everything that is happening, you know, we have had the last 6 months with an anti-dumping investigation in Europe on China, China being a supplier for 20% almost of European demand. So that has put things under a perspective that was completely uncertain. And as an importer, as a global distributor, we would like to be able to give our customers the trust and the reliability in the system so that their global strategy would keep functioning the way they always have been, despite these volatility in the regulation. Kind of the same in the US, I believe, and also in Brazil, which has recently gone through a similar process. Likewise, Europe. I think for the rest of the areas, we have the ambitions to keep growing and exploring the opportunities in a more old-fashioned way. Meaning, you know, now that the world is basically polarizing into what is that could really become attractive of trying to do. There is Argentina opening up, which is extremely interesting for our Latin America unit. And then from a pure product technology, which has been very exciting in this February, we will have the first cans indeed made out of fully recycled packaging material, melted in an electric arc furnace. We will have cans and crown caps made out of it. We will participate to a number of industry events. I'm sure we will also meet somewhere in Latin America in the upcoming months, and I'm hopeful to bring to carry some examples and samples along with me. So maybe we can have a further discussion on that and further explain how we're making this steel and how we plan to market it in the upcoming future.
Absolutely.
But it's been very exciting, very exciting.
It sounds like it, and hopefully stability will be the order of the day. So looking forward to meeting up in a few months' time. But Davide, it's been a pleasure as always. So we'll catch up soon.
Catch up soon, Alex. Thank you for your time. Pleasure.
Thanks very much.